Marriage and Family Play Therapy, Terry Kottman, Partners in Play, Chapter 10. Adlerian Play Therapy, helping the child gain insight. Third phase of Adlerian Play Therapy. To better understand their assets, the crucial C's, the goals of behavior, personality priorities, relationship, basic convictions about themselves, others in the world, their private logic, behaviors they use to belong, to meet their needs. Same thing in each phase. How their behaviors promote a sense of belonging and significance. How to re-examine perceptions, attitudes, thoughts, feelings, and actions. Strategies to help the client gain insight to their lifestyle. Using play as a primary base for interaction, connecting what's happening in the play therapy session to the reality of the rest of the child's world. Using tentative hypotheses and meta-communications about various components of the child's lifestyle. Generalizing new ways of looking at the world. Metaphors, directed role-playing. Remember, Adler is much more directive than client-centered like Dr. Landreth would use. Art techniques. Immediacy, confrontation, not confrontation with the client, confrontativeness towards the issue, and humor are effective methods to help gain insight. Metacommunication and tentative hypotheses. Each of us operates out of our own unexamined assumptions and convictions. None of us knows the truth about another person. We can only guess how ourselves, others in the world looks to another person. So Adler's practice is to offer tentative hypothetical suggestions, form of questions, qualified statements when trying to interpret another person's world. Guesses about the child's crucial C's, goals and misbehavior, personality priorities, private logic, basic convictions about self, others, and the world. Qualified statements to understand reactions, defensiveness, resistance. Direct interpretations bring the play back to a metaphorical level. Indirect interpretations, staying within the child's metaphor. If they have a dinosaur and a duck, and you know that the metaphor stands for the father and the child, stay with what is occurring between the dinosaur and the duck and do not move into reality-based interpretations, what's happening between you and your dad, until the client is ready to do so. Using metaphoric techniques, symbolic language, it's been for centuries a way of teaching in many fields. Very similar to the use of parables in the Bible or other religious teachings, puppet shows, plays, stories, artwork created in metaphoric ways for communicate what's going in their life, and indirect, externalized, safe, non-threatening processes of those experiences. Stories are used to communicate messages to children, teach them new ways of solving problems and interacting with others, helping them to adjust their attitudes, perceptions, and outlook, bypass defensive reactions to more direct methods of teaching. Using the child's metaphor. Metaphors arise in therapy not simply as indirect, less threatening ways of communicating emotionally charged information. They also serve as potent conveyors of information through which the clients reveal questions, fears, hopes, struggles, and styles of coping pertaining to their lives, therapy, and their therapist. That's page 248. Then they give you an example on pages 248 and 249. The therapist must avoid breaking the metaphor, avoid addressing the problem directly or connecting it to what is happening in the real world. Sometimes the therapist has a personal desire to know and chooses to break the metaphor. The child can shut down, change the play, become resistant, refuse to participate. It's better for the child to be able to say, I'm ready to move to a more reality-based. Designing therapeutic metaphors for the child, according to Langton and Langton, 1989. Metaphors in therapy constitute an indirect form of treatment. Like other forms of indirection, therapeutic metaphors do not engender the kind of resistance to considering new ideas that direct suggestions often can. Their experience is gentle, permissive, not confrontational or demanding. Ways to consider change. Metaphors are just a story. It doesn't require a response. At another level, it stimulates thinking, experiencing, and problem solving. In designing a therapeutic metaphor, the counselor develops a story that has some parallel to a situation in the child's life. And without pointing those parallels out, includes characters that represent selected people in the child's life and put them into similar circumstances the child is experiencing. It's important to consider the child's usual mode of communication to know how to best deliver the metaphor. There's several therapeutic procedures outlined for designing therapeutic metaphors by Brooks, 1981, Langton Layton, 1989, Mills and Crowley, 1986, Trottier and Sophilas, 1990. Some of those are: decide what the goal is prior to designing the metaphor. Decide which toys or metaphors or miniatures you're going to use. When and where you want the story to take place. Very carefully, in a storytelling way, design the scene, to set the scene up. Describe the characters very clearly. Describe the plot in very concrete terms. Use different sensory information: visual, auditory, olfactory, kinesthetic, tactile, so that it's real to the child. The protagonist in the story should make progress toward overcoming the problem, but there should also be obstacles. The resolution of the problem should be in concrete, clearly defined terms, and the goal for the metaphor should be related to the lesson that you're hoping to teach. After the resolution, the character should have some kind of celebration and affirmation of changes, of coping skills, of problem resolution. Watching the child's nonverbal reactions to the story as you tell it. Deciding if and how you want to process the story and when. Then on page 254 to 256 is a therapeutic metaphor story designed by Terry Kottman that she shares. Another storytelling technique that she shares is creative characters, where the play therapist can record the presentation of the story so the child can watch it later. And it's the same basic format. She outlines that for you on page 256, 257. Mutual storytelling, where is a metaphoric counseling technique developed by Richard Gardner in 1971 and 1986. Particularly suited to Adlerian play therapy. The basic strategy is for the counselor to ask the child to tell a story using the same character, setting, and dilemma as the child's story. After the child finishes, the counselor retells the story with a different, more constructive middle and ending. So the first setup of the story for both the counselor and the child are the same. The child tells the story as it is. The counselor comes back using the same beginning, but with different options, like the DVDs that used to have different endings. Helpful to suggest to invent a story that hasn't happened in real life. It needs some type of plot, beginning, middle, and end. The therapist can prompt as needed to help, listening carefully to determine how the story metaphorically represents what's happening in the child's life, that illustrates the child's intrapersonal dynamics, specific situations and problems that are bothering the child, typical problem-solving mode, relationships with significant others. Putting our understanding of what's happening with the child into context. Page 259 are questions to process. What's the overall affective tone? What situations and problems resemble real life? Which character represents the clients? What behaviors or misbehaviors represent or mirror the client's behaviors? How does this fit in with my conceptualization? How does the character represent the client in the story? How do other people play into the story? What are their goals? What are the consequences? How does it resolve? Those questions are there also on page 260 and 261. How do I determine what the client's personality priority is? What does it tell me about the client's crucial C's? The views of the client by himself, others in the world. The client's attitude toward life, the private logic, approaches to problem solving, and level of social interest. Then there are some case studies that you can look at on the next several pages. Bibliotherapy, a metaphoric intervention used in Adlerian play therapy, is bibliotherapy, a strategy in which books are used as a vehicle for helping the child gain insight, consider a different perspective, or learn alternative ways of interacting with others. Bibliotherapy can communicate information about problems, stimulate discussion about problems, provide solution to problems, and create awareness that others have dealt with similar problems. Normalize that it's not just happening just to me. Doesn't make it okay, but it is something that someone else has gone through, and I can get through this as well. The counselor can read the book to the child can read the book to himself or the counselor. They can read it together. They can discuss what happens in the book, how it relates to the child's lifestyle situation, or go on in session without discussing it at all, depending on what the therapist thinks is best at the time. With the child who prefers direct communication, it's usually appropriate to ask the child if they want to talk about their thoughts, feelings, and reactions to the book and how it relates to their life situation. To find appropriate books, the counselor can consult a children's librarian, obtain a copy of the book finder when kids need books. That's on page 264. Role plays, directed role plays to help children get insight to their patterns of thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and consider new ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving, to help children become unstuck, to experience catharsis. It's appropriate to use the whisper technique so the child can control the flow of the role play as they need. A role play for the whisper technique and for role plays are there on page 265 and through 267. Art techniques, kinetic art experiences, cartoon helpers, drawing body outlines, extending kinetic art techniques, pictures of their family. What's my ideal family? Who do I wish was my family? Who do I not like? What do we do when we're having fun, when we're angry, when we're tired, when we're sleeping? If I were to sculpt them out of modeling clay. Creating cartoon helpers with little stick figures with bubbles for what they think they might say. One of the interventions that is in your Google Classroom, developed, I think, by Trudy Post Sprung, are thought bubbles. Looking at those and seeing if those would be helpful to you. I know that those are also used by Leanna Lowenstein. Something similar to that. Drawing outlines, body outlines of the child on butcher block paper. The identity of the child. And then with the child's outline, putting in different parts of self, strengths, areas to improve, boundaries, things that we're proud of, things that we have been hurt by. The outline is drawn with heavily reinforced lines to show boundaries. Another good technique to teach boundaries is to have a child stand inside of a hula hoop, in the middle of a hula hoop. No one should be closer to that child unless it's someone that the child has invited into their circle than where the hula hoop boundaries extend. Symbolic representations. The rose bush, Violet Oaklander. A copy of this intervention is in the Google Classroom. It's a visual imagery with a metaphoric dialogue about life and times, and then the client draws themselves as a rose bush. They can draw themselves as different animals, or their families as different animals. With stickers, you can create a family aviary or a family aquarium. If you are looking to assess the family atmosphere, and the mother is a barracuda and the father's a great white shark and the children are all guppies, it's not very difficult to assess that family atmosphere with investigatory questions. The family aviary is the mother a robin and the father's an eagle, and one child is a hummingbird and one child is a crow. Looking at those interventions, it is what the client says it is. Ask tentative hypothetical questions about the child's perception of their family members. Page 270-71 are metaphorical questions to ask around those kinds of art interventions to determine the child's actual perceptions. Immediacy, confrontation, and humor. Immediacy is to communicate about what's happening right here, right now between you and me, considering the developmental level of the child before using immediacy. Examples on page 273. I noticed you looked somewhat scared when I got closer to you. I think you may be mad at me right now. Confrontation, again, pointing out discrepancies in the communication, not being confrontational with the child, confrontive with the issues. Confrontativeness occurs between the verbal and the nonverbal communication. What discrepancies are there? What is being said and what is being acted out? What the child has reported this session, what has been reported in past sessions, past, present, and future. Unconscious, subconscious, conscious levels. What is being reported versus what has been observed. What is being reported versus collateral information. To help the child become more aware of inconsistencies in thinking, feeling, and behavior, resulting from private logic and mistaken convictions that might not necessarily make sense to anyone else except to the client. Confrontation should be used very sparingly and very gently. And she gives some examples there. Humor, page 274. Adler believed the counselor should demonstrate a jovial attitude, cheerfulness, and good humor. Being able to have fun and joy in the playroom can greatly contribute to encouragement and connect an easier path toward insight and problem solving and future communication. Making connections between the play session and the real world. Making connections between the client's thoughts, feelings, reactions, and behaviors in the play section and those thoughts, feelings, reactions, and behaviors outside in the real world can help the child generalize insights in the third phase of counseling. The therapist would point out instances in which the child is acting as if his private logic and basic conviction are true in situations in the playroom and in other relationships and situations outside the playroom. Inappropriate strategies for problem solving in the playroom that could get in the child's way outside of the playroom, and times when the child is demonstrating changes in attitudes or behavior that can be generalized to other situations. There are questions there on page 274, page 275 through 281 is another case study using the same client, Keisha, where these things are reviewed. There on page 279 are 4 books of different options to use in bibliotherapy for some of this work in the third phase of counseling. So we will come back.